My name is Daniel Cross, and the moment I walked into that courtroom, my mother laughed quietly, and my father shook his head. To them, it was a sign of disbelief, that their youngest son, the one they'd always called the failure, was standing in a place they thought he didn't belong. I'd been the outcast of the family for as long as I could remember. My parents had built a reputation in business, polished, proud, and cold, and they expected perfection from all their children. My older brother, James, became the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Straight A's, scholarships, and eventually, a high-paying corporate job working alongside my father. Me. I was the one who dropped out of law school after one semester, the one who chased impractical dreams. When I left to start my own path, they called it a mistake. When I failed early, they said, "We told you so." They thought that was the end of my story. But life has a strange way of turning tables quietly. After dropping out, I didn't stop learning. I studied business law on my own, volunteered in community legal clinics, and eventually went back to school, not to impress anyone, but because I wanted to make something of my own. It took years of hard work, sacrifice, and isolation, but I did it. I became a licensed attorney. My parents didn't even know. We hadn't spoken in months, maybe years, after a particularly bitter argument where my father told me I'd never stand in a courtroom unless I was being sued. Those words stayed with me, not as pain, but as fuel. And so, when I walked into that courtroom that morning, dressed in a tailored suit I'd bought with my own earnings, they didn't recognize me as the man they'd dismissed. They were there for a property dispute. My father's company had been accused of illegally acquiring farmland from a local family. The irony was sharp. They had hired one of the biggest law firms in the city to represent them, confident as ever. What they didn't know was that I had been quietly representing the family on the other side, the ones they thought couldn't possibly afford decent legal help. When I entered the courtroom, my mother looked up from her seat. Her quiet laugh echoed faintly, part disbelief, part mockery. My father shook his head, whispering something to his lawyer. I walked to the plaintiff's table, opened my briefcase, and calmly arranged my documents. The silence in the room was thick. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. I didn't look at my parents right away. I focused on the case, on facts, on the people I was there to defend. But I could feel their eyes on me, confused, irritated, unsettled. When the time came for opening statements, I stood and introduced myself. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady, "my name is Daniel Cross, representing the plaintiffs." My mother's smile froze midair. My father blinked twice, as if trying to process the words. The defense attorney turned, startled, realizing who I was. The moment felt surreal, years of dismissal, mockery, and doubt condensed into that single sentence. But I wasn't there to embarrass them. I was there to do my job. As the hearing went on, I presented the case, detailed records, financial evidence, and witness statements proving that my father's company had manipulated contracts to seize the land. Every piece of evidence was airtight. The judge listened carefully, occasionally glancing at the defense table where my father sat, red-faced and silent. My mother kept her eyes down. For years, they had taught me that success meant power, money, and control. But that day, standing there with nothing but my words and my preparation, I realized success was something else entirely: integrity. When the judge finally ruled in our favor, granting the land back to the rightful owners and ordering restitution, the courtroom fell quiet. I thanked the judge, gathered my papers, and turned to leave. As I walked past my parents, I paused just long enough to meet their eyes. My father opened his mouth, but no words came. My mother looked at me with a strange mixture of shock and pride, but I didn't need either. I simply nodded, offering the same polite smile they had taught me to fake all my life, and walked out. Outside, the air felt lighter. The family I represented hugged me, thanking me for giving them back what was rightfully theirs. I smiled genuinely, something I hadn't done in a long time. That moment mattered more than any apology I'd never receive. My parents never reached out after that day, and I didn't expect them to. But I heard from my brother that my father couldn't stop talking about the lawyer who beat him. Maybe that was his way of acknowledging me, indirectly, grudgingly. Looking back, I don't think of that day as revenge. It was closure. I didn't humiliate them or shout or prove a point. I simply walked into the courtroom they thought I'd never belong in, did my job, and let the truth do the rest. My mother laughed quietly, my dad shook his head, but by the time I walked out, they weren't laughing anymore.